Study with Steph, cause she's the best. She's gonna help you get your CTS, yeah.
Ain't nothing can keep me down.
Stephanie.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Study with Steph. I am working on getting my CTS at Infocom and it's in just a few weeks. So I am currently just trying to gather the few last pieces of information I need and continue studying. So today I have with me Rogina. He is the principal and CEO of Spinitar. So thank you for hopping on here with me and joining me on this episode.
It's going to be fun.
Yes. So today on this episode, we are talking about site surveys. And I talked to you a little bit about this before, but I am coming in this industry. I'm kind of a newbie, and I'm not coming at it from an integrator perspective. So I have never conducted a site survey. This is not information that I'm coming in like already having some experience in. So this is just all new to me. So I appreciate you for having some patience and helping me out.
We're going to do our best, Steph.
So first, let's kind of like start a little bit high level. So tell me a little bit about what goes into a site survey, why one conducts one, and just kind of like the importance of this in a project and like what can potentially go wrong if it's not done properly.
Good. Well, as I mentioned before, there's really two site surveys that we'll talk about. One is maybe a TI or tenant improvement version, where you're going to go to a job site, walk a room, a facility, a space, and just evaluate what the client wants to do in that space. What is the goal of the space? Who are they going to have in there? Or what kind of presentations they're going to do, representations, those kind of things. And then the site survey is a list of things that are in that room, what type of walls they are, how high the ceiling is, what type of ceiling it is, where the HVAC is, the ambience in the room, the lighting, the windows, all of that is very important as to where you're going to place the audiovisual equipment, how the audio itself is going to sound speaker wise, where the locations of those might be, because there's lights in the ceiling. So that's all taken into account, as well as room size. So again, that's that type of site survey. It's more of a tenant improvement and that. And then there's the second portion, which is construction site surveys. And, that's open walls, that's dirt, that's a lot of things going on in a construction site with drywall happening and floors and ceilings and HVACs going on. A whole different look and feel for you as an individual. You're showing up with steel-toed boots. Typically, you got a vest. You have to wear a helmet, a construction helmet, along with safety goggles or glasses. And then you're walking the site with a set of plans, looking at the spaces and getting locations for, because the walls are open, locations for things like display mounts on the wall, because you need backing for those display mounts, and set up locations for that, checking conduits and J-box sizes and locations of that, checking where the IDF room is so that you can get from one space to another space if that's a home run for the cabling. So you're laying out all the infrastructure, if you will, of that specific, open canvas at that time facility.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I wanted to first kind of talk about like health and safety requirements at a work site. So is that something that like you kind of look for the same type of like, you kind of have the same blanket health and safety rules no matter where you go, or does it kind of depend on the job site, like what you're looking for before you go in there?
Well, a lot of our technicians are OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 certified. We have every 2 weeks, I believe it is, a safety meeting with all the on-site field technicians that they go through a safety class, whether that's how to climb a ladder, how to set up a ladder from a safety perspective, to when it's appropriate to wear hard hats, steel-toed boots, what you're looking for around the job site from a safety perspective, not leaving extension cords laying around or sharp objects, cleaning up trash when you're completed, those kind of things. So, we follow those guidelines on every facility and space that we go into. There's really not, construction sites are a little bit more obviously dangerous, open things happening there because there's a lot of other people, other trades on site that you're having to deal with. So you got plumbers, you got HVAC people, you've got carpet, you've got flooring, concrete, drywall, framing, those type of trades on site. And so there's a lot of activity going on. And so even though we're not doing a whole lot around those trades, we are on site checking to make sure that our equipment, at least the infrastructure for our equipment, is in the right locations.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Does it ever come into like the decision-making process where you have to take into consideration the client's insurance company or the client-specific safety protocols as well?
Not typically. I mean, in
Okay.
a lot of these, it's usually the general contractor that has their own one, they want our insurance to make sure our insurance and liability is covered through that. So they take our insurance and make sure we have all the the correct limits on things. But at the same time, they have typically their own at least initial safety meeting that nobody can go on site until you have passed their safety protocols. Once you pass that, then you're allowed on site, and it's typically your first visit to the job site so that you're aware of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when the whole reason that you're visiting the job site and the whole reason that you're going on and having to conduct a site survey is because you're trying to collect information about this space's layout and information about what necessarily can and will go into this space from a technological standpoint. So when you're trying to gather that information, what is kind of like the list of steps that you take? Like, okay, so yes, you know that you need to wear protective clothing when you're going there. So like when you're on a job, like what is like the checklist to like complete to make sure that everything on the site is like ready to go?
Well, stepping back a little bit, there was some plans that were drawn out by a designer, labeled and sent out with the architectural plans, and it's all infrastructure. So
Okay.
there's no technology in those plans. They're typically plan views, and you're looking for where infrastructure would go. Infrastructure being you want backing for a display
Okay.
that's going to be mounted on a wall. You want to make sure the electrical is going to be in the right location, that the conduit for the data and audio, video signals, the conduits in the right places. The floor boxes, as an example, are in the right places with conduits going to the right location. A lot of cases, speaker locations, or at least wiring to the speaker locations, that we've got conduit to those. So it's all that site survey is just to ensure that you're taking the plans that you developed and that got placed into the architectural submittal package, that when you're out there and you're checking a space, that everything in that room or in that space is ticked off. Again, conduit locations, backing, floor box, table box, conduit, those type of things.
So this comes into play kind of after you've gathered that initial customer information about, okay, this is the problems that they're having in this room, or this is what they essentially want this room to do. So after we've kind of established this, let's make sure that this room or this space can architecturally hold everything that it's supposed to.
That's probably a good way to say it. There's all this, like, again, I go back to the infrastructure. There's all this infrastructure that needs to be in place to meet the needs of the client.
Right.
They don't know any of that stuff because it's behind the scenes. They'll never see it. They don't see the conduit. They don't see any of that. It's all they know is I need to come in and plug my computer into the table here, and I need to put it on that display. How it gets there, it's irrelevant to them.
They don't
They
care
just want to
about
make
that.
sure
Yeah,
it works. Yeah. And so
exactly.
that's where those site surveys are very important, is that everything is in its place, especially when you're not only dealing with the client, but dealing with the architect or the interior designer that put it together. They don't want to see any wires. There is a way to do it. You can walk up and plug it into the display if you'd like. And then there's wires hanging everywhere, both power and data and signal. And you don't want to have that. It's out of sight, out of mind. Make it simple, make it invisible to everybody that's in the room, and they focus on what the presentation and or what's on the monitor at that point.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm in the AV Install Nightmares Facebook group. I don't know if you're
Oh,
familiar.
no, I never heard that. But
Yeah, no,
there
it's
is AV Nightmare. I should get into that.
Oh
one. I'd
yes,
love to
there
hear
is an
that.
AV Install Nightmares Facebook group. And in there, like, I think that there's always like some situation where the client has wanted this and this and that, and they've come in there to do it. And when they're finally installing it, they've accidentally like tried to drill into a water pipe, and then all of a sudden there's a flood. And like, so I totally understand the importance of the site survey, because the whole reason is like, yeah, you're making sure none of this stuff happens, so that when you go in there and put in that equipment, everything's going to go where it's supposed to, and you're not going to like flood somebody's conference room.
That is correct. Yes, absolutely.
So somewhere in this kind of like sequence of events, you do a site layout drawing. So this is kind of just drawing where everything is, including all of like the HVAC and the pipes and everything, correct? So that you know that when they go in to install something, you're not installing it in the wrong place.
Well, we're not responsible for that. That's what the site
Okay.
survey is going to make sure that the
Right.
lighting is not in there. We're going to get a reflected ceiling plan and lay out where the speakers would go as an example. We'll get a
Okay.
plan view, and we'll say we need the J box 18 inches above finished floor, or 42 inches above finished floor for a monitor of some sort. We're going to go in and make sure that that is in place before we ever install any technology.
Okay.
At all. So that's that infrastructure component. That's all supplied again to the architect or interior designer. They're going to incorporate that into their drawings to make sure that there's no interference. If there's interference with something, like on a reflected ceiling plan, we can see the interference. We can see where the lights go.
Right.
We can see where the HVAC is, all of that. When it comes to walls, in a lot of cases, we don't see some of that. There could be a credenza there and a furniture plan that we're not, that we don't get or we don't see. There could be, a window that they're thinking about putting in, or a pass through of some sort that, we want it on that wall, but now, it's not going to be centered on the wall because of the fact that there's going to be this closet or door or pass through or window.
So whose job is it to draw those plans and make sure that it gets to everyone on the project so that that type of miscommunication doesn't happen?
So what'll happen is we'll get the architectural drawings from the client and or their design firm. And again, that's going to be a reflected ceiling plan, a plan view, those kind of things. We'll take those drawings, place them into our system in CAD, and then we'll start laying out the infrastructure over top of that. Now there is BIM out there. That's the modeling program that's supposed to help everybody make sure that you don't fall on top of each other early on in the process versus later on in the process. But it's very difficult to have people use that, at least on the AV side. We've run into a few projects like that. We've trained our people to do it, but they really want to control it themselves. So they're only allowing certain people in to do BIM. So we still just do our own drawings, and then they integrate them into their drawings. And so when those issues come up, when they integrate those into our drawings, they'll send them back to us for review. And then we'll look and see if there's any interference of products. If there is on infrastructure, then we'll go back to them. If we don't see anything on the drawing, then we go out and do the site survey as everything is going along, whether that's once a week, once a month, depending on the status of the project. We'll find out that there's issues then, and then work through them there on site with the job superintendents.
That makes sense. I know you were talking about like a few of the different types of drawing views. Do you mind like going over a few of those with me and like telling me what the differences are? So you mentioned reflected ceiling plans. So what does that necessarily show?
So a reflected ceiling plan, if you look at any space as an example, the reflected ceiling is really what the ceiling is to be is going to look like, whether it's a hard lid being drywall of some sort, whether it's 2x2 acoustical panels or 2x4 acoustical panels. They'll lay that grid out, and then as they lay that grid out, you're able to see you're able to see where the locations, I guess, of the lighting components are, the fire, the HVAC, so that you can replace the audio visual components around that, I guess. And if there's conflicts, then we'll start working with the lighting or fire alarm or fire sprinklers, those type of things, to just see if we can change that around, whether we can change ours around. We're always the last in, by the way. We're not always the first in. People, it's always about the aesthetics first, versus the electronics. It's hey, you know what, fit it in there somehow. Well, you try, but the quality of the video and the audio is very, very, very important. So
right, yeah, that makes sense. And so then a plan drawing is just kind of like the view from directly above, but it's like showing the floor and kind of where everything's going to go, right?
Correct. It's more like a bird's eye view. So you're looking over top down into the space and going, that's where the desks are going, or chairs going, or couches, or tables, those type of things. Yes.
So then those relative to an elevation drawing, what is that one?
That's more the side view.
Okay.
That's more of a side view. So you've got, the ceiling, that part of it. Then you take the ceiling out and you're looking at the plan view, and then you 3D it, turn it to the side. Now you're looking at it from a side view.
Okay. And so then what is a section drawing?
A section drawing is taking a piece of that room or that space and detailing it down to because there's certain things that are happening in that location that you're going to want to see. So it's like blowing that section up a bit, so you've got more detail around it. And a lot of times that could be an IDF room or an area that's very crowded with HVAC and electric and fire sprinkler and all that.
But another thing it mentions in the book, when in the study guide, it talks about like the importance of understanding the drawing scale. So it talks about so is there a rule of thumb when it comes to scale, or does it really just depend on the project and you have to make sure that there's a key?
It's been a while since I've even looked at plans from that perspective, but I think you just got to be very cognizant of what scale they are using on the plans. And then when you print, you can't use that scale and print it out on 11x7 sheet of paper and go, hey, that scale doesn't work that well. But to get an understanding of the scale is very important. Again, when it comes to locations of things, it's not as critical as building a bridge. That's way more important because you're connecting two ends together in the middle somehow, and that just seems to work. In our particular case, it's you walk into the room and it's supposed to be centered in the room, and we think the wall is 10 feet, and we're gonna find the middle line at 5 and then put the display up there. We may walk in there and it's 9 feet 10 inches, or it's 9 feet 6 inches. Now we're making the adjustment on site to make sure that cosmetically that the display is in the center of the room and not offset by 6 or 8 inches.
Well, one thing that I've been told that's like really going to help me in the future is like, if to understand anything about a scale, when you're looking at any type of drawing, look at the ceiling, like ceiling tile size on the drawing, and know that a ceiling tile size in real life is 2 feet by 2 feet, and you will be fine.
You know what? If you that you know what, that's great advice, because it's either going to be a 2x2 or a 2x4.
Right.
So you can't go wrong with, okay, now I understand the scale of it because it's 4 feet or it's 2 feet. You got it covered, and that's great advice, because that doesn't change.
Great. So anything that can help me pass this thing, I'll take it.
There you go.
So tell me a little bit about a CAD system, because that's not anything I'm familiar with, but it talks about that in here too. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
You must be computer aided drawing. That's got to be CAD is what you're talking about.
Oh, so sure, CAD. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, exactly. Because I was like,
I don't know.
I say that only because all drawings are done in CAD.
Okay.
AutoCAD is the actual organization. Autodesk is the organization, but AutoCAD is the program in which all this architectural stuff is drawn.
Okay.
And whether we do our single lines in that, or you do the infrastructure, it really starts with the infrastructure first, the space and look and feel of the space, and reflected ceiling plans, as we talked about. And then it goes into the single line drawings and construction drawings from there as well.
Okay.
It's that computer aided design that they refer to as CAD. Yes.
Okay. So it also talks a lot about like some common drawing abbreviations. And are those things that you have to just kind of memorize and know in your brain, like what some common abbreviations are? Or is there a key ever on different drawings where it just is like an abbreviation here, but then the key over on this other page like tells you what that stands for?
Well, I think there's a lot of standards out there that you'll see, like AFF is above finished floor.
Right.
Is what that means. So there's going to be some of those little acronyms, if you will, that are out there that you're going to have that just, they're defined somewhere. They're defined usually in the front of every drawing. There's always a syllabus of some sort up there to kind of help you. And then there's the drawing stuff, like speakers are usually a circle with an S in them, if you will.
Okay.
So it's a speaker type. You'll see a monitor, the same kind of deal, and there's a lot of standardization around that. I know in our company that's our standards. You'll see that across in a lot of cases as well. But yeah, and then cable labels, those type of things are the same scenario. J boxes are all standardized, those kind of things. So yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
You look at it a couple times, you'll know.
Do different companies have a different standard for like using different symbols or using different acronyms, or is it all kind of somewhat similar across the board?
It's fairly similar across the board, I think.
Okay.
Because again, a lot of the stuff that is the infrastructure is going to be J boxes. That's been standardized on CAD itself, and CAD has a big library when it comes to infrastructure on things. So data jacks, data cabling, AV cabling, all of that is relatively standardized. Electrical wiring, type of outlets, type of J boxes is pretty standardized. Where you'll see maybe some differences, speakers, because it is AV. But I will say most of the time you'll see a circle with an S in it, but then sometimes you'll see a circle with something else and you're going, oh, I think that's a speaker. Nope.
Yeah.
It's referring to fire alarm or something along those lines that somebody's using it as a standard there. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. And for the most part, there's going to be some kind of key or syllabus at the front that's going to kind of like tell you like, here's how to interpret this. Okay.
Yep.
So are there any standards or anything that kind of help to understand or interpret as you're going and looking at one of these drawings or anything? Like, are there any kind of, I know that standards are not really like an AV thing, like we just kind of don't have any, and that's just kind of life. But are there any common anythings that are used in your experience?
Great question. There's a couple companies out there that have been trying to standardize on some of the stuff, X10 AV being one of them. on blocks and things like that. Is there a specific standard? Is there an organization that does it? Bixie's probably one on the data side, more network and data side. They're fairly well standardized across the board. When it comes to AV, not so much. That's something that we've not been able to do in the 100 years of doing this stuff.
And that's just kind of an across the board AV problem. But like that is, as I've been studying for this, I've simply been begging for some standards, because I was like, it'd be so much easier to study for, a standardized test with a few different standards in our industry. But, that's wishful thinking. It
would be so much easier if we had standards. And I think on the integration side, we could actually make money if there was standards.
And there are options. I do know that there are options for standards out there. There have been companies that have been working to like push themselves as the standard, but it just hasn't been accepted by any like governing body or anything. So then there actually aren't any. So that's correct. That's lovely. My next question was going to be on like reference flags, because I know that like if every piece of information that you need for a project was on one drawing, that would be a very busy drawing. So I know a lot of times they're going to have like a reference thing for you to be like, look at this other thing to come and tell what you need to do here. So how do you tell what other piece of something you're supposed to look at? Because I can just imagine, like, if this were me, I would just get very overwhelmed by all the pieces of information I'm given. And okay, now you have to go reference this thing to look back at this thing. So kind of, how do you keep yourself like organized in that situation? And does the way that the drawing is done and that the syllabus is done kind of help you with that?
Again, it's almost like a dictionary, if you will. There's a triangle, a circle, usually with a number on top, and a location or something on the bottom, if you will. And in that, it's referencing typically a page number of some sort, or a drawing location of some sorts, where you're going to look at it, or a definition. Because you're right, if you define every little piece that this screw in this area needs to be a 5/16, they're not going to call that out on every one. It's going to be, reference note A, or note 1, or note 2, or whatever. So there's notes on there as well that you go look at that note and go, oh, okay, that's a 5/16 screw, or a 1/2 inch. Nuts.
I think that probably what would help me most is if I could shadow someone who like goes on a site survey, so I can kind of like look over their shoulder. But in COVID, that's obviously like a little bit harder to do. So I'm having to just kind of like pretend here. But
where are you located?
North Carolina. So like Raleigh area.
You guys are like wide open out there, aren't you?
I know.
Like California.
Like ish, like we were for a minute, but the Delta variant has put a wrench in those plans a little bit. So we are kind of like going back into kind of a more strict COVID plan a little bit. Yeah. So, if we are going somewhere out in the world or going to the store, we have to have masks on again, whether you're vaccinated or not. And like for certain places of business, depending on what city. So Durham requires you to be vaccinated to go into certain places and stuff. So it's interesting. So that would probably like make it a little bit difficult, especially if it were not outside for me to like shadow someone right now. But
I was going to say the theory, which is research and looking all this stuff up, and then going to reality is completely different. Perception, it's just not. It's not the same. And shadowing somebody, you would learn a heck of a lot more than what advice I'm giving you at that point. Because this would make a lot more sense if somebody said 12, 18 inches above finished floor. Really, kind of what does that mean? Does that mean center? Does that mean top? Does that mean bottom? Does that mean what is that? And it is standardized. And then you got 42s and 48s and all kinds of stuff. And if you're putting up cameras and camera locations, those sizes are different as well. And it's, what do you to put it in the right location, you got to know what some of the terminology is. And then, somebody measures it for you and say, see, I measured that. And, they might have measured it from the ceiling down, but most of it, the floor is the most common area because it doesn't change.
Right.
The ceiling could be off by several inches, and you're going to miss it. Something's going to fall on top of something else. So,
but I guess my last little thing that I wanted to cover was when it comes to converting measurements. And I don't know how much that comes into play because, most of what you do are, American installations. So you're using, the American measurement system.
Inches and feet.
Yes, but there come situations where like it's in the metric system and you have to convert. Does that happen that often to you, or is that like not that much of a concern? Because like it's easy to convert, but I'm sure that there have been
the internet tells me all the time.
Yeah, like I'm sure that there have been situations where like an accident has happened where you thought you were supposed to be working in inches and feet, where like in reality you were not.
I mean, I can't recall a case where that's happened, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I mean, where you see it in a lot of cases is on specification sheets from manufacturers because they are overseas and they're selling across the globe.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, it is harder to find inches and feet than it is the metric system, but it's always there. It's always available. But when you come to a site survey and that, nothing is in metric, at least in California and Arizona that we deal with.
I think those are about like everything that I wanted to cover. Is there anything that I like left out or anything else important I should kind of know or understand, like walking into this?
No, again, a site survey is just the initial part or preparation for the installation.
Okay.
So, if you think about it that way, it's like preparing for anything else. If you're going to bake a cake, you got all this preparation to do, get all the ingredients in one place and do all, get yourself set up and ready so that when you're ready to mix the cake, you're ready to mix the cake. You're not grabbing this and grabbing that and doing this. And that's the same thing, in a space is you want to be prepared. Everything needs to be there so you can get in and get the work done and get out at the same time. So
you're right.
I think when it's that would be probably a summary of the site survey that you're looking for.
And I guess just my last question for you is do you have any other just random pieces of advice for me as I continue studying for this and preparing to take it in a few weeks?
Don't be an integrator.
Wow. Great advertisement for our industry, Jay. Thank you.
It's hard. No, I'm kidding. No. I've been at it 30 plus years. Are you kidding? I still love it. I still am into it. It seems to be getting challenging, more difficult. But my question is for your future, if you were in the integration side, are you for the working at home, working hybrid, or coming to the office and being part of the integration team?
Well, I fully believe in a hybrid future. I believe that there are some meetings that could have been an email. I believe that not everything you need to be in the office to do, but I believe that in the integration business, it is important that when you need to have those initial client meetings and you initially are trying to figure out what a client wants, that is a lot easier to figure out in person than it is over Zoom.
One of the things in the industry in integration, we do not, you talk about standards.
Yeah.
We don't, as an integration world, the collaboration part is so important. And, our setup is we have a bunch of what we call dog bones setup where the teams are sitting in dog bones, but they're all in close proximity. And if they start talking about a project or they start talking about a problem that they're experiencing, or have you had any interaction with this manufacturer, most of the other people in our facility in the dog bone area can hear that. Somebody has heard that and will pop up and say, hey, so-and-so over at Crestron or so-and-so over at Extron help me with that. When
Right.
you're a hybrid model, that's missing. And so
Sure.
everybody is on an island and they're not getting the information. There's not that co-collaboration. There might be the team or individual collaboration, and we're doing it, but you're always reinventing the wheel.
But I just think that hybrid is just going to be a thing forever, or for like the next few years. So it's just kind of like in my brain, I'm getting used to it. But I do also see the quality of things when everything is back in person, because it's just like trade shows, right? Like everyone is so tired of coming to virtual events. We're so burnt out. We're tired of sitting and like looking at each other over the screen. And so I do believe that people are ready for in-person events again, and people are ready for trade shows again, or at least they want to be, if they're not, trying to stay home, or so it's just definitely an interesting time to be in our industry. So I will
Yes,
say.
it is. Yes, it
But
is.
yeah.
Are you going to be at
Are-
InfoComm?
I will. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
Will you be there as well?
I'm only going to be there on Wednesday.
If I see you on the floor, I'll definitely stop you and say hey.
Sounds good, Steph, for sure.
But thanks again for hopping on with me and for helping me out. I really appreciate it. I hope to God that I'm going to pass this thing on the first try, but if not, there's always the second try.
Well, I hope I brought you a little bit of value.
You did.
A couple good nuggets.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great week. Good luck on
Thanks.
your test.
Thank you.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Study with Steph, 'cause she's